Does a face tattoo mean that you aren't appropriate for a client-facing job? Not necessarily. You might have the exact skill set for that, but
best in the game.
Exactly right. But people do have preconceived notions about face tattoos.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think at the end of the day, you sort of have to. There's no point complaining about the rules of chess. You just have to learn to play the game. The people that are just being filmed without their consent in the public, where, you know, and then not only are they being filmed without their consent, they're a butt of a joke that they don't even know about. Like,
what makes a joke that is centered around race okay and not okay?
The first thing that jumps out at me, I would say, is
anyway, you ready to start?
Let's go.
I need to.
What is it on School of Rock? The teeth and the tongue and the toes and the lips.
Nice. Okay. Hey Ash, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah. You been on holiday recently?
Yeah, caught a tan. Yeah. You know,
I can't. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking of the backlash immediately. Obviously, this is not Ash. This is Harvey.
Not Ash.
Harvey's Harvey's our warehouse manager. Ash is all caught up in wedding stuff.
Yes. We'll see if I'm still warehouse manager when this is released.
Yeah.
In case I've said something.
I've told you to. Yeah, we got to be careful.
Yeah. So hopefully the editor is on point.
Yeah.
It's me.
It's you. I used to be around, but it's me. Cool. I think here's what we'll do. We'll do like you're Harvey. Do you want to get into it?
What
into the sphere of Harvey, or do you want to just talk about the stuff?
I mean, people don't care who I am.
Okay.
I'm here in place of Ash for the moment. Judge me as necessary, I suppose.
The only brief you've gotten, because you've seen an episode?
I've seen a few episodes.
You've seen a few episodes?
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. And now I'm here.
And now
that doesn't happen to most people, to be fair.
Yeah.
A podcast you watch and now you're on it.
Yeah. So. I'm curious how this will turn out, because you and I typically watch the same podcasts, whereas Ash and I watch very different podcasts.
Right.
And they're kind of like complement. I watch all comedy podcasts. Ash is all, economics.
I watch a fair amount of comedy or just generally entertainment based stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can imagine Ash is all super serious.
Yeah, I mean he's goofy. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
But you and I both watch podcasts where we see a lot of content where you're like, oh, that's cancelable.
Yeah.
And they pull it off.
Yeah. Which
brings me to the other question, obviously. A little bit of, joke involving race at the start there. How do you make... No, that's a bad way to ask that question. What makes a joke that is centered around race okay and not okay?
The first thing that jumps out at me, I would say, is intention.
That's what I thought initially too.
But again, that could also be misconstrued. So it could be, it could not be so obvious that somebody's intention was to make a joke.
Yeah.
I think creativity is probably a big part of it as well, because it's not, and timing, definitely timing, because I was just about to say like creativity, because I've heard certain jokes over and over again and it wasn't funny, but then there's been times where I've heard that joke before, but in this moment it was funny. So I think that's what it is. I think it's how funny it is. If it's really, really funny, you can kind of get away with anything. Pretty much, yeah. I think people care more about how funny something is versus how offensive it was.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a thin line, but I think, you can, if you make enough people laugh, the people who are annoyed and crossing their arms and frowning, they'll be, overshadowed essentially.
Yes.
So.
What a lot of people don't know is that you've come up with a few of the topics that have actually done really well. So you asked us to talk about stoicism. You asked us to talk about debt. They've been generally some of our higher performing podcasts.
Okay.
So the ultimate question is, what did you want to talk about today?
One of the thoughts I had was code switching.
Yeah, which I didn't know what it was until you explained it to me.
Right, yeah. So the phrase maybe goes over some people's heads, but most people are probably familiar with the practice.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I think is associated with black people, but I think everybody does it to some degree, depending on your environment, sort of changing how you speak, your mannerisms, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the way, I didn't know there was a word for it, basically. I think everybody to some extent does it. I think it varies in amount depending on how not how much of a minority you are, but how much of a minority you're perceived to be.
Right. Okay.
Because I think then there's generally the pressure to like fit in. Like, what's an example of code switching?
Like, okay, so before working here, I had a lot of time working on building sites.
Right.
I would speak very differently on a building site than I would, you know, in our Friday meetings or whatever. It's a very different way of speaking, way of carrying myself. Still an upstanding member of society at all times, of course.
Yeah, but way more racist than our Friday meetings.
Yeah, we tend to leave the race out, even though it is Friday. I think, maybe we rescind that rule a little bit, get a little bit racy on a Friday. No, I'm joking.
Well, hold on. Is it okay to be racist on a Friday?
I mean, if there was ever a day for it,
I
would probably say a Friday is the better of the days.
Because by Monday people will forget.
Hopefully. I mean, feel free to be the guinea pig in that one if you want, Sam. I'm not risking it.
No. Where do you find like an acceptable amount of code switching? Because we talked about this. There's some things that are, here's just my opinion. There's some things that are like, there's just basic adaptability. I'm in my environment, and in order to get the best results amongst these people, I need to conduct myself in a certain way. And then there's a line where you're like, somebody will ask something of somebody, and you're like, you're just kind of abusing your power there. Where do you find that line? Yeah,
it's difficult because I guess some of it comes down to how much do you care about how you're perceived by the people around you. So if you don't particularly care about certain people's opinions, then I guess you don't need to code switch that much. But at least in a professional setting, there's going to be certain things that I think are beneficial to you objectively. So it's probably best to maybe tailor them to some degree. Like I can say I have a Leicester accent that I don't use at work.
Okay.
It just falls out for the most part. So I think that's mainly because nobody here has a Leicester accent really.
Right.
To be fair, even in my home life, I've got the strongest Leicester accent in my home life. Like most of the people I spend my time with, my school, I don't really see many of my school friends now. But if somebody I grew up with was to see this now, they'd say, "Oh, he doesn't talk like that."
Right. Okay.
And they'd be right.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it definitely helps as well because because we have a few people that are from different backgrounds, different countries, etc. So I think it makes it easier and a bit more palatable for other people if I'm not like, "How are you, mate?" Or like it's just easier if I'm just not doing the whole proper Leicester like that accent. So
what's not okay in code switching? Like what? Sorry, you're talking about code switching from a you point of view, like what you do. I'm thinking of it more as like being asked to do something.
Right. I think I can think of some examples of this, like hairstyles and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's big in black culture. Where it's like you can't have your hair like that. And you're like, why?
Because there's certain hairstyles that, like, there was a time where I don't know if this is still true, but I remember there was a time where if you were to Google professional or unprofessional hairstyles, you would get very specific results.
Right.
So unprofessional hairstyles, as an example, probably something similar to what I have.
Right.
That would be listed as unprofessional.
Yeah. That's where I was thinking of, like, it just sounds like an abuse of power, where it's like, okay, can't make racist jokes on a Friday. That's not how business gets conducted.
Not yet.
No. What, are you working on something?
No. Yeah, I've got a type 15.
But so like saying, adjusting how you speak for better productivity, I don't think a line is being crossed there. But if someone is like, you can't have your hair like that. Yeah. I'm like, okay, but where does the productivity end? Like, how does that impact somebody's productivity, or how does that impact somebody's ability to achieve a mission?
Do you think there's anything that is reasonable even in that same vein? So if someone had like, I don't know, like bright pink hair, or bright, like, something that's a bit more out there, because my hair might be, I don't know what. I was going to say abnormal, but it's not abnormal for my culture. So like, it might just be like something that, depending on who you've been around, isn't something you see every day, at least in a specific workplace.
Kind of. Like, so it depends. And it should be very dependent on how... Okay, so your role isn't particularly client facing. So no, to someone like you, I can't, unless it poses a risk to your life, as in like long hair and there's machinery coming around.
Right.
It's not really a big deal. The problem is though, and I might get some hate for this, but if you are client facing and you have something that is outside of the norm, then you might start to impact the way a client perceives us as a business, which when you're a titan of the industry doesn't necessarily matter. They have to work with you because you're the best. But when you're an up and coming business, then if it impacts your ability to gain or to keep clients, then it's not necessarily just your job at risk, because you might be harming the business. It shouldn't be. It absolutely shouldn't be. You should be free to express yourself however you wish, but it might start to impact your business because let's say you have bright pink hair. Just not hating on anyone with bright pink hair.
Just an example, people.
Just an example, people.
Calm down.
Everybody stay calm.
Rescind your petition.
Yeah. But let's use that as an example. And you're working within an industry. I hate this because we work within the pharma industry. Thankfully, none of our clients are like this. But if you work within the pharmaceutical industry or a particular industry where you come across a regular type of person, a type of person who has a very specific traditional mindset, and they see that and they're less inclined to work with you because of that, then yeah, you shouldn't have to change how you appear. But then again, I do that to some extent. I code switch. It's not to do with like physical appearance, but I speak to clients very differently how I speak to my parents. And I speak to my parents very differently how I speak to my group of friends on like a Friday night or something. So yeah, in some situations, and you can't say this, but in some situations it can impact you and it can impact a greater cause. Like the other people that work for the business. Let's say it's a business of 20 people. Whilst your actions shouldn't have an impact on them, we live in a world where it does.
Right.
And suddenly less business comes in, their jobs are on the line. It's a hard one to navigate.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you can't control how outside people perceive certain things. So if certain, I guess a less extreme, well, actually more extreme but less controversial example would be like face tattoos or something. Yeah. Now, does a face tattoo mean that you aren't appropriate for a client-facing job? Not necessarily. No. You might have the exact skill set for that.
Might be the best in the game.
Exactly right. But people do have preconceived notions about face tattoos. Yeah. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, you sort of have to. There's no point complaining about the rules of chess. You just have to learn to play the game. That's how I look at life at the moment. So
I think even though in certain situations you can draw a line. And that's a very hard line to draw. You might disagree with this, but I think it's a hard line to draw, but I think it is specific to... No, I don't think you'll disagree with this. It's like communities who have, for the lack of a better word, faced hardship. So for example, if a client is like kind of put off by somebody who has bright pink hair, I'm still going to try and push to work with that client. Okay. If somebody sees somebody with an afro and they're like, I won't work, like that might be a position where I'm like, okay, well, maybe we don't want to work with you. Right. That's where our business's values align. And I know, and like, how do you choose? That's a hard bit.
Well, yeah, that's the bit that becomes subjective, which is difficult. But at the end of the day, I think if you're in a position where you can pick and choose who you want to work with, I think then you have that discretion. Like I might have my own opinions on the fact that somebody doesn't work with people who have afros. I might think, okay, that probably means things. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to waste my life worrying about it or trying to convince them otherwise. I'm just going to move on to the next, essentially. So, but yeah, I think for the most part, it could be a case of, they don't want to work with us because of X. Well, because of X, we don't want to work with them. Because you think that way, we're not willing to continue working with you anyway. Yeah.
I do think though, it's easier to draw the line if it's like you said, if we're talking about an afro, chances are there's like racial motivation why they don't.
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's, I feel like it's easier to turn that away. Somebody who like, well, you've shown some like kind of racist intentions. Right. And I don't want to work with you. Whereas if somebody is like, I don't like the color of your hair or something. Well, to me that, again, I think the distinction may be personal choice. Right. As opposed to, just something you have or something that's part of your culture.
Right, yeah, that's a good point, to be fair, because that a cultural thing like an afro is yes, it's a choice. You don't have to have an afro, but at the end of the day, there's no like, there shouldn't be any like radical thoughts that go to anybody's minds based on having an afro. Yeah. Not to my knowledge, anyway. Maybe I'm ignorant to what racists think. but yeah, I guess pink hair is a bit more like, I think you're trying to like make a statement. Maybe someone could think that, whether that's right or wrong, or accurate or not. I guess they could maybe. I could imagine somebody to think, your pink hair is an attempt at making a statement potentially. We're using pink hair arbitrarily.
Yeah, it could be pink, blue, orange, black, brown.
It could be
blonde.
anything that's not, the norm.
Yeah. What's like a? I think I have some of these as well. What's a code switch that, I'm going to try and say this without gagging, but gives you an ick? What's the code switch where you're like, come on, you didn't, like, let's say you see that, you see another black person do something, and you're like, that's a code switch, but like you're hiding who you really are. Do you have any of those?
That's a difficult one because because I think my interactions typically, if I can see somebody code switching,
you get why.
I can normally understand why.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be some sort of things where I'm like, does your upbringing match your environment? And because it doesn't, you have to code switch. Like, if this is like a permanent thing, like outside of work, because I think work is sort of like a separate thing to like social code switching. Yeah. Like if I was just like at a social event, then I'll just have my Leicester accent most likely, and I'll speak how I normally speak, like as if I was just with my friends. Yeah. Outside of work, I don't code switch very much, to be honest. To be fair, I might speak to like you said about your parents, you'll speak to your parents differently than you speak to your friend groups. Yeah. That's relatively true. Like I would speak to most family members slightly different than I would speak to most of my friends or just people around my age that I know or whatever. Yeah. But outside of that, I can't think of anything that would be specific enough to say like, that's too much. Like you've gone over your code switching quota. Like that's you've overdone it. Can you think of anything that would fall into that?
I thought I did, but I can't. I can't think of anything.
Oh, here's one. Actually, I just thought of one. Especially because I used to work on building sites and I've done a few private jobs. The guy who clearly has like a desk job. But he makes a fuss and says stuff like, I did a bit of landscaping when I was a lad. Like he wants to be one of those guys. He's trying to like show like, no, I'm working class me. Like he's doing all of that stuff. Like it's like, you don't have to do that. Like we don't think less of you because you don't work outside. That's not I think historically speaking, the connotation was actually the opposite way around, where it's like, you work outside. Whereas now it's sort of like, I don't know, it might be a male thing, to be fair, where they just sort of want to be like, I've done a little bit. I banged that fence up. I did. It's like, you definitely didn't. But okay, fair enough. That's probably the only thing I could think of.
I think that's what I was thinking of. It's not necessarily you like code switching, but somebody else doing it to switch to your code. I don't know if I'm using that right, but like to fit into your.
Oh, okay. I think I get where you were sort of getting what you were getting at. Like sort of like here's one. When I was working on site, I remember I was listening to something. I don't know what I was listening to. I was listening to some music and out loud on my phone, and I was working like fairly by myself, but there was other people like near-ish. And I remember this bloke, he was a bit older. He said, he was like, any chance you could put something on that, we might all like? And I was like, what? And he was like, well, I like a bit of Bob Marley. And I was just like, I don't. And just stared him in the eyes. I was like, of course I like Bob Marley, calm down. Obviously I like Bob Marley, but the fact that you assume not only that I like Bob Marley, that I have it on my phone available to be played. This is like, this wasn't like Spotify is super common. Everyone has Spotify on their phone.
Let me ask you a question.
Go on.
Did you have Bob Marley on your phone?
No, I didn't. Okay. I mean, I might have had like one or two songs, but not enough to like, okay, I'll put the Bob Marley playlist on, which is what I don't know. Maybe I'm like, amping it up, making more out of it than it was, but it sounded as if he was saying that though.
Because I just thought of the Men in Black scene where he's like, no, I don't steal cars because I'm black. Yeah, I stole that car, but it's not because I'm like. Yes, I have Bob Marley on my phone, but it's not.
But that's the thing. I might have like a few songs that I like a lot, but not like a full playlist. Like I can just let my phone run. Yeah, there's 6 hours of Bob Marley music to go on. Like, just
what do you think was his train of thought to asking you?
Do you know what? I've thought about that numerous times, and I think like I keep trying to like every time I do it, I dial it back because I'm like, no, you probably put in way more like racial connotation in it that actually belongs there. Yeah. So it's like I think he just more was like, okay, I don't like this music. Okay. And to be fair, it was pretty what I was listening to, I'm pretty sure it was like quite like it was rap music. Do you know what I mean? So he was obviously thinking, okay, he's a young black male. Yeah. I was in South London. Yeah. So maybe he was like, yeah, this is, what they listen to, right? Yeah. And
not like I'm trying to connect with him.
Right, but that's even worse actually. Like that's even like when people do that where it's like, oh, did you see Power last night? Like when they just start talking about black shows all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I really liked it. Like oh, it's so urban. Like whenever somebody uses the word urban, I'm just like, bro, stop. Like you don't have to do all of that. Like it's cool. Like I watch the same stuff you do sometimes too. Like, I used to love EastEnders and Coronation Street. Like we can talk about that stuff too. But that was. I think he probably had less racial connotation than it sounded because when I was like, no, I don't like Bob Marley, he was like. And then I think in his head he was like, I may have done something. I think I said a thing.
You saw the cogs turning.
Yeah, because everything got kind of quiet after that. Or he was just thinking, kind of black guy doesn't like Bob Marley. Which, I don't know. Yeah. But it's more fun for me to do that. So.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask about authentic self. Ollie made a really good point of like, authentic self is kind of bullshit because you are a different person in so many different scenarios. Yeah. Who do you feel like you're most comfortable as? Work Harvey, family Harvey, friends Harvey?
I think over time and depending on where I've worked, my answer for that would have changed. Like definitely very comfortable as like who I am at home. That's, like who I'm around like my mum or my missus or whatever. That's all pretty standard. Yeah. But I think working here as opposed to working other places, I definitely feel it's weird because it's like I feel like I'm still my authentic self, but just a different version of it, if that makes sense. Because I think that humans are adaptable. That's just what we've done throughout human history, is just adapted to whatever surroundings or environments we've been put in. Yeah. So I think to the concept of authentic self is almost like you're painting yourself into a corner, because what does that mean?
There's not just one of those.
Right, exactly. Because one might not, be the best thing for dependent on the situation. You could be in a situation where it's like, well, no, actually I need to be this part of myself or this version of myself. So I guess it's like it's like a smorgasbord of personality that you just like, I'm just going to turn up the slider on this bit of my personality today, or
that's
this
a good
bit,
way to put it. I like that. Yeah, depending
on who it is you're around. That's how I'd think about it. What about you?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that, because I was just thinking. This is back to our earlier point, but it's what made me think of it, of like things I don't like. And this is how I've grown as a person. Maybe you have something similar, but in terms of code switching, if we consider two different people, and like I'm from a Middle Eastern family, and if I look at like my Middle Eastern family's like habits, let's say like in public, a very common Middle Eastern thing to do is to eat with your hands. Right. And like me growing up in like Sweden and England, I see my dad eating with his hand, and I'm like, no, I'm not a part of that. That's not me.
Bless you.
And as I've grown up, I've been, I don't know, I'm much less ashamed, dare I say proud, to be part of that group. So I think I used to be way more comfortable as my most English self, or as my most Swedish self. Because I feel like I would fit into a group. And then you grow older and you see the value of family, and like you look around the different communities that you're a part of. One of those communities is your group of friends. And so growing up, that's the most valuable thing to you. And so when you're affiliated to another community, one that the original one doesn't approve of, makes you feel really embarrassed. Yeah. And then you grow up and you're like, well, I don't I don't care as much as I thought about this, but there may even be a bit of guilt about it, but I've neglected this community for so long. Like, this is such a huge part of me. And so now I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll eat with my hands too.
Right, yeah, you'll double down on it now a little bit, yeah.
So I think I'm switching. I think I was most comfortable as my, as my work or as my school self. It's turning really like cheesy, but I think I'm starting to reconnect with like my family self, my original self.
That's good. It's difficult as well, because I'm at a point where I don't want certain parts of me to be like an identity too much, because I think some people, they carry their trauma or their struggles or whatever it is that maybe they felt ashamed of. Right. They wear it as like a badge of honor now. It's like that's like your whole identity is this thing. Yeah. And I don't think that's necessary. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing, because you paint yourself into a corner and you pigeonhole yourself because you feel so attached to showing that at all times that you stop being a multifaceted person and stop being
so you just become that one thing.
Exactly, yeah. So I think people are getting too tied to their identities at the minute, in terms of like, oh well, I went through this, people made fun of me for this, and now I'm doubling down on it, to a point where it's like, okay, but what else though? Like, is that all you, like, I get, like, I'm not saying you shouldn't feel however you feel, but at the end of the day, is that all you are? Like,
Well, I asked you to keep it clean. That was a very clean way to navigate quite a difficult topic.
Yeah, no, really good. I'm not going to lie. There was a couple of couple of loose tiles I had to step on there. But yeah.
You really ducked some doo-doos there. To use a friend's reference.
Right.
How would you describe yourself then? Like,
do you know, it's something I think about quite often. I think I like to describe myself as somebody who values truth and honesty above most things. I know that's like a cliche answer, but I do try my best to stay with, like, and I try to hold myself accountable if I feel like I wasn't as honest as I could have been in a moment.
Let me adjust your trajectory here.
Go on.
So I was thinking, when you were describing the earlier thing of people wear their trauma or their experience as a badge of honor, I was thinking, like, if they're at a party, someone's like, hey, who are you, yada yada, and they'd introduce themselves like, hey, yada yada, and like they'd work it into the conversation here and there, and like make jokes about being broke because that's a part of who they are, or they do X, Y, or Z. So I was more curious, if I was meeting you at a party for the first time, what are some of the things you would work into that conversation? Like, what are some parts of you that you would embed into what you're talking about?
I think,
keep talking.
Sorry.
I'm just going to reset that camera. But
yeah, I think you inevitably end up saying something to do with like what you do for a living, and hobbies and things like that you get up to, that sort of thing. Yeah. It's a difficult question, to be fair, because what outside of, like, you know, your little interests and hobbies and stuff like that, and what you actually do on a day to day, because, you know, we spend like 70 to 80% of our life at work. Yeah. So I can't think of a good way that isn't cliche of answering that outside of those things. Do you have
No, do you know, this comes from a conversation I had with my friend in Germany, where super simple question. She says, what are you up to this weekend? No, sorry, what are you up to this week? And so I start to explain all the things I have going on at work. I had a meeting with Unilever. I had a meeting with another client. I was preparing for this big presentation. So I started to explain all of these things. And I said, how about you? And she turns to me and she goes, well, my brother's coming in from out of town. We're going to try this. We're going to go do that. And then I'm meeting up with some friends. Like, and I thought that was such an interesting contrast, because
yours was all professional and hers was a lot more social.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
And I thought that was a very interesting defining moment. In the beginning, I didn't like it, but I just realized it's quite defining of our personality. I have no idea. She could be terrible at her job. I don't know. But given some of the sort of high-ranking positions she's held, I'm like, all right, you're clearly somebody who cares about their career.
Because that was what was my question. Was like, do they have like a fairly involved career?
Senior. I'm not going to say what, but quite senior roles.
Interesting.
And their focus was on, you know, what they were going to do, and mine was what I was going to do during my work day.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, because I agree with you, like, and now I'm wondering if it's like a cultural thing, because you and I kind of align on that, both being in the UK, working in the UK. But I do typically find if I'm introducing myself to somebody new, I typically talk about what I do for a living. I don't really bring up my hobbies all that much until I get to know somebody.
Yeah, I would probably say the same. And then the only other outside of that bit is the philosophical, like, well, who are you intrinsically, and what are your views on existence, and et cetera, like that kind of thing. And that's sort of wishy-washy anyway, and could change at any moment. Like I could have a bad experience tomorrow, and all of those answers change. Yeah. But what you do. Because I think it's, at the end of the day, if somebody's asking you, who are you? The answer is really, what things take up most of your time? That's what I would translate that. I think that's how we translate that question, whether that's right or wrong.
For new people, I agree.
Yeah. Right. Because
off the bat, it's really weird to go up to somebody and you're like, oh, who are you? And you're like, oh, I'm Sam. Here are some of my philosophical beliefs. Here's some of my life values.
What is this, university?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. That...
You just have some flashbacks there?
A series of like 5 people just popped into my mind.
Right.
Because that's, universities are very, in hindsight, it's such an interesting place because everybody's trying to make their first impressions count. Right. And so I could sit here and I could shit on these people. I could say, somebody came up to me and was like, ha, 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 yada, yada. In all honesty, man, so was I.
Right, yeah. But I guess that your ha, ha, ha looks different to theirs.
Yes.
That could be it, really. That could literally be the whole difference is, you've perceived what they're doing as more annoying than any other.
Sorry, I just got to check.
What time are we on?
4, but Jean-Luc is out.
Oh, is he gone?
Let me just take care of that.
All right. Well, I'll assume that this part will be edited out. If not, I have nothing. So I wonder if I can make sure this is a part that's edited out. With an ad for. I assume that means it has to be edited.
Yeah, I hate some of my...
I've just made this an edited part, by the way.
Okay, yeah, I can see some sound waves. So who's he talking to?
Myself and the 30 viewers.
Okay, nice.
So this has to be edited, essentially. Where were we?
It has to be.
It definitely has to be. I didn't say anything wild, but right. It would edit.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Now that I'm editing them, there's a lot more free reign as to what we can say. I didn't know, but Ash and I were super aware that this was going to someone else to edit.
I see.
As soon as I told Ash, I'm editing these going forwards.
Just everyone let loose.
Pre and post, the cuts that go out live, it's gone wild.
Okay. Well, I did a Kirkland ad.
I forgot to go. All right, we'll have some fun with that one.
Yeah, for all your hydration needs.
Yeah.
Where were we
just
that?
Me looking back self-loathingly.
Oh, and you judging folks for their, your interpretation of their first impressions, essentially.
I actually can't stand the person I was.
Really?
Like, when I look back at some of the things I've said to meet people, honestly, some of these, they go as far back as, 5 or 6 years. Some of them as far back as last week. You just look back and you're like, did you really say that out loud in front of humans? Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I've definitely had that where I'm sort of like, oh my God, that conversation, I think I was unconscious for it.
Yeah.
But like just autopiloting for it. Did I say anything wild? Like, what just happened? Like, I saw coloured spots, so I don't recall. Yeah. But I definitely, that's a good point though. Looking back at yourself, how, because I was thinking about self-awareness when we were talking about like topics for the podcast. I was thinking about self-awareness as one, but I was like, maybe it's too broad and you've probably covered it. But I was thinking about just like, obviously it's good for like monitoring your own progression and stuff like that. But do you ever think back to like, do you ever worry about that your perception of yourself is wildly different to everybody else's perception of you?
Yes. Yes, I was thinking about this very recently, and I was thinking about how much I like myself. And the best answer I can give you is it varies so much. Sometimes I think of myself as a piece of shit. I can't believe I said something. Like I just hate myself. And sometimes I'm the shit.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, look at that guy. What an awesome guy that is. There's such a weird fluctuation.
It's not a bad spectrum though. Do you know what I mean? Because at least it's not like piece of shit, like little bit less piece of shit. That's like a way worse spectrum to live on. But at least it's like, high highs and low lows, I guess. That's better than...
I used to really worry about the lows. I used to really overthink them because, some people are in your life for a long period of time, some friends. Some are only in and out for snippets.
Right.
And so they might only catch the bad snippets of you. And that's the bit I used to really worry about, that this is overthinking to its finest. I'm very good at that. But I used to think, that person was only in your life for the span of a year. And you don't like the person that you were for that year.
Right.
And so there's someone wandering this earth with this impression. A really easy way to reflect on this is maybe a past relationship. You don't like the person you were in that relationship because, some of them will last for a year, some of them longer, shorter. Or friendships, like with family, they have the context. If I'm an arsehole for a weekend, then they know, that they can base that off of the other stuff.
This is a temporary like state.
But if you're in a bad place for the entire duration of a relationship, I've definitely thought like, I don't like who I was. So there's somebody out there wandering this earth thinking that guy's a piece of shit. I don't like that. But the one thing that kind of dug me out of that was Daniel Sloss talking about his comedy, how his old stuff makes him gag. He hates his old comedy. And he goes, it's good. Like, if I looked back at that and like, that's awesome. How much have I really progressed? How much better have I really become?
Wow, okay.
And that really helped me contextualize like, okay, cool. As long as you hate that part of you, then you're becoming a better person.
Something that's sort of in a similar vein to that is Russ... he featured on a song, I forget who the artist was, but Russ featured on a song that came out recently. Apparently the verse that he used for that song is actually a really old verse, like over a year old or something like that. And the reason the song took so long to come out was because he wasn't sure whether or not to rewrite the verse. But he said for him to rewrite that verse would be disrespectful to who he was before.
Ah, I like that.
So the artist that wrote that verse, it might not be an artist that he identifies with today, but at the end of the day, that's who he was at one point. Yeah. So rather than invalidate the, creative side of that person, he, continued to just let it be, even though he said it made him cringe. Yeah.
How about the kind of stuff you say? Can you take that in similar vein? Because that's a hot topic in comedy at the moment, and it has been for the last 10 years. But, a lot of comedians getting crap for things they might have tweeted 10 years ago or so. And a lot of people... I always use the Kevin Hart example.
Yeah.
And Ricky Gervais has a great bit about that, where, they asked him to... they asked him to apologize again. I think he apologized once, and then they asked him to apologize again. And Ricky Gervais is like, well... if you're just going to keep apologizing, you might as well stay homophobic, or you might as well stay racist.
Right.
And just keep apologizing.
Yeah, because you're basically saying that the first apology meant nothing.
Yeah.
So we need a renewal.
One. Yeah.
Can you freshen up that apology for us, please? Like, I just think it's a bit, I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm sure there's probably not many people that if there was, documentation or footage of everything you've ever said, let alone everything you think. Yeah. I think we'd all be in some hot water at some point, and you'd be like, I don't feel this way anymore, by the way. Yeah. And everyone's like, yeah, but you did. It's like, but does the change not count for anything? Because for me, an apology without a change in behavior is meaningless.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that example, the Kevin Hart example, just kind of reiterates what Russ is saying. Of like, even if he was that person, apologizing for it would almost invalidate that he's changed. Again, apologizing again. The first time, fine, he needed to.
It also depends how much time has passed, though, right? Yeah. Like, if you said something messed up a week ago, then fair enough. Then, we can sort of like, well,
did you mean it?
Yeah, like, did you mean that? And are you willing to apologize, etc., whatever, grab your pitchforks. Yeah. But if it was like, oh, you said this on the 8th of January 19 years ago, and we're really offended by it. It's like, at some point, is it not just your fault for looking for it? Like, it was being left alone, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, and again, especially if there's been a change in behavior since then, like I don't understand why we're bothering. Like, well, I'm just not going to lose sleep over something that someone, even if it's racist, I'm not going to lose sleep over something that someone said. Obviously there's a limit.
Yeah.
You know? There's some things that are just not passable where it's like, wait, you, regardless of how long ago you said this, we need something like an explanation of some sort.
Yeah.
I'm just not fretting over most things that people said years ago.
But that's genuinely a part of. There's a lot that this world is heading towards that I'm life and society and everything is heading towards that I'm a huge fan of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited for even. But there's some areas that we're heading towards that kind of frighten me, but primarily I don't like it. As somebody who, might someday have kids.
Right.
I don't like, releasing my children into a world where so much is documented. This is so hypocritical. We're talking about this on a recorded podcast.
Right,
I get it, guys. I heard it. I get it. But I don't like that we are entering that we're pretty deep within a world where so much is catalogued.
Right.
So much is recorded. There's elements of it that I like on a flight recently, I was scrolling through my Instagram. It had loaded before we took off. And it was nice to see a castle. Like, it was a picture of my cat back in London and just stuff like that. And it was rarely personal stuff. It was me with my friends, or it was like something that I thought looked cool. And I don't mind that level, but I realize now, and I even have these thoughts myself. I had this thought very recently. I was driving to my friend's house to have a bit of a barbecue about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it was so sunny. The weather was gorgeous. I didn't turn the aircon on. I was driving. I had the windows rolled down. So just fresh air pummeling my face. And I was listening to Radio 1 and a song came on that I loved. And just a combination of all these things made me feel fantastic. And I hate myself for this, but one of the first thoughts I thought was, how do I capture this moment?
Wow. Right.
And I started thinking to myself, I was like, will a video do? Should I take a picture? Should I yada yada? And I was like, the songs are going to be over in like 30 seconds, dude. Stop.
Just enjoy it.
Yeah,
man.
stop. Put the sat nav back on and just ride it out. And I'm so happy I did. But I'm still kind of angry at myself that my first thought was, how do I capture this?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we've been conditioned to think that way now, right? We want to share everything. Like, if you see a lot of the young kids today, they almost don't look right without the phone in front of their face. Like, it almost looks strange. Like, but I think it's a difficult one to balance as well, because there's sometimes where it's like, I want to encapsulate this moment so I can look back on it, or it's like I just want to be in the moment. So it's a difficult balance, because I can understand both the ideals, but at the end of the day, I think if it's a short thing like it was with the song and all of that, I think that's something you should just enjoy because it's small and it's pure. But if it's like a long experience, I think taking a few minutes out to just take a little video or a photo or whatever to sort of have like, oh, remember this, even if you're not, you might not have been fully in that moment for a small part of it, but if you've got the majority, like a half an hour experience, if you take 5 minutes to take a video or a picture, then that makes sense. But I think when you completely just like, I went to a Beyonce concert and watched the whole thing through my phone. Like, okay, you paid thousands on a ticket for that. Like, I just I can't understand that concept, because, unless you go to a Beyonce concert every day, whenever they're on. But,
that's crazy, because I've never thought of it as being conditioned to. I thought this as I was looking at some smokers recently. I saw them, and there's a group of 4 or 5 smokers all on their phone having a cigarette. I thought to myself, back before, smoking has existed way before phones.
Right.
So back before you had that phone, what will you be like? I was thinking, would it look so weird to not be on your phone back then? To be doing nothing. To just be stood outside smoking a cigarette. It doesn't have to be a cigarette, whatever.
Just being outside.
Just being outside doing nothing.
Just idle.
Is not, if you're waiting for a friend or whatever. If you're just sat on a bench, just like, I feel like that would look normal. But try doing that now.
Well, I think you would get anxious as soon as that's like, if you just sat on a bench now and just watched the world go by, I think you'd feel weird. Like, I think you would, at some point, you would start to think to yourself, let me get my phone out. Like, I don't think it would be very long before you have that, or you would at least have to very consciously tell yourself, I'm not pulling my phone out.
Yeah.
I think you would just have to do that. But it's funny that you say that, I guess, but I haven't been to a nightclub in quite some time, but in my memory, nightclubs, the smoking area was actually one of the most social parts of it, because obviously it's too loud to actually talk in there. So I'm just wondering if that is the same thing where people are in nightclubs, go out to the smoking area and then don't talk if they're just on their phone, because that would be, to me, that would be super strange. But
yeah, and the other thing is the nightclubs in the phones. There's a lot of areas now where people are talking about wanting to ban phones, like taking out your phone, and a lot of it, I have to agree with, like gyms.
Definitely,
again,
all for it.
Yeah, again with gyms, there's a lot of people doing it right, but maybe like the gym locker room, there's a lot of people. When was that okay?
To be fair, that's kind of new to me. I didn't realize that people were doing that. People are filming in the locker room. Yeah,
and like generally just like flexing in front of the camera.
But there's mirrors everywhere in the gym, right?
Flexing in front of the mirror and like recording it. But then there's also like very poor job of pixelating the naked guy back who just came out of the shower.
Right, yeah.
Right, they think they're doing well by putting like an emoji there, but nobody's an expert in like motion tracking.
Right,
There's some stuff that kind of slips through, and that person's like, I didn't come here for this. And the same example, and I really admire, I don't know if you're familiar with the Warehouse Project in Manchester. You mentioned you don't go clubbing much nowadays. I don't myself, but I've heard of the Warehouse Project. And the guy who runs it found out about just this man in his like 60s or 70s. I think he was dressed in like lycra, and he just loves clubbing. He loves being there. Somebody videoed him. He was mocked heavily online. Took it on the chin. Took it like an absolute champ. But the owner of the Warehouse Project, as well as one of the nightclubs in London, was like, gave him like a lifetime pass and stuff. He was just like, I've loved this kind of music since I was a kid, and I'm not going to stop now.
Fair play to him.
Yeah, and I just thought, like, how many people kind of feel like that? How many people are like that used to maybe go to a club, they enjoy dancing, or they not even just a club, any environment where you dance.
Yeah, there's a lot of examples today where there's people that are just being filmed without their consent in the public, where, you know, and then not only are they being filmed without their consent, they're a butt of a joke that they don't even know about. Like,
that's the problem.
I think that's wild, to be fair. Like, I don't think that should be okay to people, that you can just be like, let's all make fun of this person. They're not even, we haven't even got the, like, you know, the stones to do it to their face. We're just sort of like all behind our phones laughing at this one person. Yeah. And then they don't see it until, I don't know, like their grandson says, "Granddad, you're viral." That's I'm not for that.
It's the sharing, I think, that's the big deal. And I remember a time where filming certain things was very heavily policed. When I was 15, 16, I was making short films with my cousin, and the amount of time security guards would approach us and tell us, you can't do that here, or you can't do that here. And it's a lot, like, we had cameras, not big, but like DSLRs, but yay big. Phones, it's a lot easier to, like, you know, hide, and that's a problem. I understand some people, actually on a camera it's way more obvious. There's a bright red flashing light, but on these you can't really tell.
Nothing.
You can't tell that somebody's recording. And I just remember being in so many places that you could even argue are public, but we were 16. We weren't messing with the security guard. If they told us, "Oi, don't film here," we would generally leave. But I don't feel like that's the case anymore. You can kind of get away with videoing anywhere, even a damn locker room, as we've already discussed.
Well, you got to think that when you were doing that, there was barely any incentive for it, whereas now there's
genuine reason.
So much incentive. I don't know if you've seen any of this in the public at the moment. That Mizzy kid that was on Piers Morgan's show. Right. Basically, he's calls himself a prankster, but that word has lost all meaning within the last 10 to 15 years, I suppose. Yeah. And basically,
and social experiments.
Well, it's not. That's too much credit, to be honest. Saying social experiments, he's just picking on people, essentially, is what he's doing. Like, there was one where this was insane. Like, to me, this is absolutely insane. It looks like quite a nice area of London. These people's front door was open, but, you know, it's the middle of the day. They're in the house. They're like, whatever. But basically, he walked in the house. I think he's with his mate, and he's recording for TikTok. And he's like, the woman, you can tell she's quite scared. She's like, James, please come to the front door. He comes upstairs, the man who lives there, and he's like, what are you doing in my house? And he's like, oh, is this where the study group is? And he goes and sits down on their sofa.
Right.
Like, he doesn't know these people. He's just walked in a house, walked in a random house. And it's just like, what the hell are you doing? Like, it's not normal. There was another one where he walked up to an old lady in the park and he grabbed her dog and ran. Like, he picked up the dog and just ran away.
Right.
Like, and the woman's obviously like, please leave my dog, like, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like...
stressful stuff.
Yeah, there's like... And to him, that this is like comedy and prank videos or whatever. But it's like, it's really not, though.
No.
It's not what this is. Like, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's not a prank if you can't explain to the person afterwards that it was a prank and they go, oh, you got me. If that's not the vibe afterwards, if the vibe is like, I don't care if it's a prank. Like, you picked up my dog and ran.
Yeah. You're like, in my house.
You're in my house. You're sitting on my sofa. Yeah. And, you know.
Like, we don't have guns here, but people have, like, air pistols that could blind people and actually really puncture wounds. If you're not wearing, like, I mean, nobody would be on your side.
Exactly. As far as I'm concerned, if you walk in somebody's house and get hit or whatever, sounds like a you problem to me. That sounds like you know, there was a case expedited of these issues.
In when I was I went to really crappy primary school, semi decent high school, and really good high school, and kind of a good college. But I went to a really shitty primary school.
Okay.
It was in the middle of a council estate, and it was most of the people grew up to become some sort of a drug dealer.
Okay.
And this one guy, I remember, I forget his name now, but he was from my school, because I remember I was like, why is he in the front page of the Metro? And he was in the front page of the Metro because he broke into an old man's house. Old man had an air rifle, shot him, and he was trying to get some sort of compensation for being shot.
Oh, please.
And I don't think he got any, or I don't think anything happened, but I just imagine anybody reading that was like, he's an old man and you're in his house. He's in his house. That's the end of that justification. Yeah, it doesn't matter
how old the man is at that point.
You're in his house. The justification kind of ends there. But the fact that you want pity...
Well, I guess that's where we're at now, right? Is you might as well try it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because there are crazy cases out there where people do get compensation or whatever. Excuse me, even if it is something that is entirely their fault. Yeah. It's like, you created these parameters. You didn't have to do that, but in fact, you were doing criminal activity. And somehow we're supposed to say you're the victim. I don't I just don't see how that works. But
as a man who has never entered a stranger's house, uninvited, I don't think it's a crazy coincidence that I've never been shot with an air rifle.
Yeah, there's probably some correlation there. You have less likelihood of being shot if you don't home invade.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to do a study for that one, but I'm fairly confident on the day off.
I think the odds are really stacked in my favor of not getting shot.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're up to an hour, dude. We should wrap up.
All right.
Ash does the outro, so I don't really know what to do here.
What does he do for an outro?
What thanks, like and subscribe. I thought you watched.
Oh wait, maybe I don't stay till the very end. I don't know. When I know that the end is coming, maybe I'd skip the outro. I don't know. But what do we do? Hit the like, the subscribe, and hit the notification bell for the next one. All that good stuff. That's what the YouTube people do, right?
That's what we do now.
That's what they do.
Some people on like Spotify, like where?
The Spotify people. I don't know. What do you do on Spotify? Is there similar? There's a love heart. You can click that. I don't know.
Give us a rating.
Ratings.
Do you know what's really? We're actually getting some decent views on YouTube, but we don't. On Spotify, it doesn't tell you the rating of a podcast until you've had 10 ratings. I think we've had like 6 for ages.
Come on.
I know. We're up to like a good 600 downloads on Spotify. But yeah, not enough people have given a rating. So if you go look at it, it doesn't tell you what is rated.
Right.
Just gives you the option to rate it.
I see.
But once 10 people does, it gives an average of those 10.
Okay. Well, I hear a lot of people say that the most important metric on YouTube is likes.
Right.
So, and comments as well, engagement as a whole, I'm pretty sure. If you physically do something, that's what they care about the most. Yeah. So do that. I tend to watch podcasts on YouTube the most. Yeah. I don't know if you get more viewers on
Way
YouTube.
More. YouTube, we're up to like 4,000.
Oh, nice.
So, okay. Also let us know what you think of Harvey. If you prefer him to Ash, then the next natural progression is to have Ash and Harvey on. And then maybe that's how I get kicked off this podcast.
And if you can't stand me, keep it to yourself.
Keep it to yourself. That's cool, man.
It's cool. Just
well, send us like a DM. You don't get to see those.
Okay, yeah.
I'll break it to you gently.
Sam can tell me in a very soft, managerial manner. That would be nice for me. Yeah.
All right. That's the end. That's the camera going. Fuck off now.
That's the time. Peace.